Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Campbell and this is the Real Review Australia and New Zealand top-ranked Chardonnay tasting. Now, to order wines or replay tastings, just go to the Real Review website and click on events. We hear that many of you have ordered from wineries, which is great. Otherwise, open a bottle and sip along with us. This is an interactive format and we're going to ask questions via Q&A. No, you are going to ask questions via Q&A, and I'll taste two wines and then answer a selection of those questions. Chardonnay is the third most planted grape variety in Australia, behind Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignon, and New Zealand is third as well, behind Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir, and it's enjoying a renaissance in both countries. I thought before we start the tastings, I could just say a few words about how I assess Chardonnay quality. Color's not super important. Color gives a clue. I certainly look at the color but put on guard with it. Doesn't give me the finite answer. Aroma is a good sign. I like to have a good and a reasonably intense aroma in the wine. Although that can be affected by temperature, glasses, and so forth. So it's a sort of slightly moving target. Complexity is one of the Chardonnay's great strengths. There are layers and layers in a great Chardonnay, there are just layers and layers of wonderful flavors that keep unveiling themselves. Flavors from the fruit, flavors from the winery, and they should all be in harmony and working together. I keep quite an open mind as to style. I don't try not to let my personal preferences overrule. There is many different Chardonnay styles and very valid Chardonnay styles that people enjoy. Intensity and length of flavor, I think, is very important. We don't want an insipid wine. We want wine with strength and power, underlying power that often I like to have a power that's given subtly, so subtle power rather than overt power. Texture's important. Texture, but several textures are valid. I mean, we've got some very smooth, a lot of big, rich, smooth. You're going to see me get a bit side of me using smooth textured with this lineup because many of them really deserve that description. And balance, harmony of fruit sweetness and alcohol sweetness against acidity and phenolics. And of course, there's the X factor that is present in every great wine. That's something that's very, very hard to describe and explain, but you know it when you come across it. Now, the first wine we're going to start with is 2019 Pooley Cooinda. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Cooinda Vale Chardonnay from Tasmania. Make sure I put it out here. Could get into routine here. Pooley was established in 1985 and it overlooks the Coal River in southern Tasmania. The vineyard has red-brown sandy loams and sandy clay loams over clay. It's a low vigor vineyard and the clay limits root penetration and devigorates the vines, and that's an important quality aspect. The grapes are hand-picked, whole bunch pressed, settled, then racked to barrel. Wild ferment in mixed barriques and puncheons, 40% new. The wine's aged for 9 months. No malolactic fermentation, which is interesting because this is cool climate country and with prominent acidity, and yet they've chosen not to use malolactic to moderate that. And minimal stirring to reduce the lees influence in the wine and to let the wine rest on its fruit strength rather than oak and malolactic oak and yeast lees. Let's taste the wine and find out what it's all about. You know, I had a sneak taste perhaps an hour and a half ago. So the wine's had a little airtime between then and now, and it really has opened up quite a bit. So I'll start by saying this is a wine that perhaps deserves a little bit of aeration. I use a big glass to swirl it around, and that does a pretty good job, but you can use an aerator or decant it. I'm getting really citrusy grapefruit aromas, quite a vibrant, high energy Chardonnay, thanks to its quite assertive acidity. Remember, this is Tasmania, and the wine has not had an malolactic, so that will emphasizes the acidity. The acid's not hard, it's lovely acid and drives a very lengthy finish. I'm getting an oyster shell mineral character with impressive purity. It's very young now. Great place to start. This really wakes up my taste buds. But as I said before, I'd love to see this wine in a few more years. It's really I would pick this as a long distance runner. Now we gave it 96 points, or Huon did actually, and rated it 7th out of 178 2019 Chardonnays from Australia. The wine carries a retail price in Australia. I don't think it's available in New Zealand, for Australian $65. Winemaker Anna Pooley recommends the pan-seared ocean trout with beurre blanc sauce and potato dauphinoise. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it sounds absolutely delicious. I think she's onto it there. I'd certainly like to put that food and this wine together. Okay. Now the next wine is 2018 Saint and Scholar, the Masters Series Chardonnay from the Adelaide Hills. This is Saint and Scholar's flagship Chardonnay from a single vineyard. It's a 50-hectare vineyard, and they choose the best parcels. It's not all in Chardonnay. It's planted in other varieties as well, but they get the best parcels of Chardonnay for this Master Series. It's from 5-year-old dry-grown bush vines, which is interesting. So an unirrigated vineyard, and it's been on trial in 2016, 2017, and 2018. This is their first commercial release, so it's hot off the press. The vineyard's grown on stony soils at the top of the hill, and they become more alluvial at the bottom. Interestingly, they pick higher up the hill in wetter years and lower down in drier years. So there's no formula for the patches that always supply this wine. It'll vary depending on the season. It's 100% whole bunch pressed and fermented under wild yeast, 60% new oak, 40% in 1 year puncheons. Let's check the. Delicious. Gets a lot of boxes ticked straight off. It's aromatic. It's quite complex. It's got, I think, tree fruit, nectarine, peach, citrus, grapefruit, a little bit of hazelnut and subtle struck flint character. Nice purity, ethereal texture, a perfect balance of acid and sweetness, alcohol sweetness, and fruit versus winemaking artifact. I think this is a wine with the X factor, and it's also very approachable now. The Pooley is a little tight and there for the long term, but this can be appreciated now. I wonder how it'll age. It's so good now. It's hard to imagine getting it a whole lot better, but time will tell, of course. I'd describe that as a contemporary and sophisticated Australian Chardonnay. That's a terrific wine. And it scored 96 points from the Real Review, and it was rated #1 of 71 2018 Chardonnays from the Adelaide Hills area. So oh, it has a retail price of Australia $80. The winemakers, I should say, Stephen Dew and Reed Boswood, recommend asparagus with blood orange and toasted hazelnuts, citrus spiced fried chicken wings. Now that is a dish I'd love to taste with or without this wine, but certainly with the wine, and it looks pretty adventurous to me. I'm going to go now and check the questions and see if I can answer one or two. Wine tasting blind, Bob. What are the main differences that allow you to distinguish between an Aussie and a New Zealand Chardonnay? Yeah, in a blind tasting, how would you pick between the difference between a New Zealand and an Aussie Chardonnay? That is a good question and a very difficult one to answer, because I don't think there is a stereotype New Zealand or Australian style. We've got such a range of climatic types. Think of New Zealand going from Auckland, Waiheke, right down to, or Northland, all the way down to central Otago. Obviously, many different soil and climatic types, and then add to that the winemakers' palate to mold the wine into the style that they think's best, and you just got such a myriad. I think it might have been, if I went back 20 years, I think it would have been relatively easier to differentiate between New Zealand and Australia. But today, I think it's very difficult. Australian Chardonnay, as I've certainly noted when I compared the first four Australian wines, are really there's nothing stereotypical about those. They're all very different and unique and individual wines. So sorry about that. I wish there was a pat answer I could come up with there, but not an easy one. What else have we got? Do you have the wholesale FOB price of the wines? No, I'm afraid we don't. The prices, I'll give you all the RRPs, that's the recommended retail prices, and you can work backwards from that to get an approximate FOB, but you'll have to really contact the winery to get that. The rule of thumb is to drink New World Chardonnay about 3 years after vintage. Any thoughts? That's an interesting thing. Rule of thumb, drinking Chardonnay 3 years after vintage. That's not a bad time frame. I know, I've heard there is a theory that Chardonnay, New World Chardonnay, or just Chardonnay, can go through a little bit of a tunnel phase after about 3 years. So it gets a little bit dumb as it's starting to develop, but hasn't quite developed secondary bottle age flavors, and it's starting to lose some of its primary fruit flavors. So so beware of that. I think with screw caps, it's sort of opened the window, and it would have. So the 3 years under cork would probably be 6 or 7 years under screw caps now. But I haven't personally noticed any significant dips. I think 3 years is quite good. It's just a chance for, you've still got those good solid primary fruit flavors, and the wine has just had a little time to mellow and integrate. So I find that rather than stick to a 3 year or a 5 year or whatever, it's nice to try the same wine at different intervals and see that added dimension of that age can bring to wines. And that's one of the virtues for keeping a cellar. It's one of the benefits, I should say, of keeping wine in a cellar. We better move on to the next wine now, which is, thank you for those questions, and we'll answer some more shortly. We're now going to juggle things around here. We're now going to look at Howard Park, 2018 Howard Park Allingham Chardonnay from Margaret River, another exciting Australian Chardonnay region, better known for Cabernet Sauvignon, but well known for some pretty cracking Chardonnays. Howard Park's one of my favourite Western Australian producers. They make wines in Margaret River and the Great Southern. I'm particularly fond of their Riesling from the Great Southern, but they have a good Pinot that from down there too. But and this is from the best blocks in the Allingham Vineyard, so it gets the cream of the crop, if you like. It's from shallow gravel and sandy clay loam over ironstone soils, and it's in a cool south-facing site in the Carradale sub-region of Margaret River. It's made of 2 Chardonnay clones, and one is Gin, which is very popular in Western Australia, and the other one's Mendoza, which is very popular in New Zealand. And both of those clones tend to produce bunches with what we call a hen and chickens format. So it has big berries and with very small berries, and you get terrific concentration and sweetness from the small berries. There was a strong strong field of thought that suggested that Gin and Mendoza were actually the same clone. They've just been given different names. But very recently, genetic fingerprinting has established that they are 2 completely separate clones of Chardonnay. In winemaking, it gets a light settling and wild ferment in barriques and puncheons. That wild ferment is now a almost de rigueur amongst serious Chardonnay makers, and there's definitely a move away from. I would have thought 10 years ago it would have been all barriques, and now there's definitely puncheons are becoming quite dominant in Chardonnay cellars. 40% new oak and matured in barrel for 9 months. They say it may undergo malolactic fermentation, so they keep their options open. It depends on the season. They'll make a call as to whether the wine goes through full, partial, or no malolactic. And the wine has minimum fining with no filtration. Let's put it to the test. I just get this peaches and cream. It screams out peaches and cream. It's got a peaches and cream aroma and a sort of a peaches and cream texture too, with very ripe tree fruit, cashew, hazelnut, a sort of baguette crust, a little bit of that. Absolutely delicious acidity, and it really pushes that finish. It's just terrific. This wine definitely has the X factor, and I think it's deliciously drinkable now. But gosh, I'd like to see it in another 5 or 6 years again. I'm sure it'll be a different wine and possibly even better than it is now. That's might be a bit hard to imagine. I think it's delicious stuff. This got from Huon 97 points, and it rated number 2 of 76 2018 Chardonnays from Margaret River, and it carries a recommended retail price of $89. The winemaker, the winemaker Janice McDonald said the perfect food match is seafood linguine with clams and mussels, which sounds absolutely delicious. I had seafood linguine last night for dinner. I didn't have this wine next to me, unfortunately, but I might be able to change that tonight. There are some leftovers in the fridge, so we'll see how we go. All right, let's move on to the 4th Australian wine, which is which is 2016 Ocean 8 Grande Chardonnay from the Mornington Peninsula, another hotspot for Chardonnay in Australia. Ocean 8 is a relatively small producer. I think they've got 17 hectares, and the vineyard's on sandy loam soils with a reasonably low cropping level of 2.8 tonnes to the hectare. Oh, not reasonably low, it's very low. And it's an interesting story about this wine. The owners travelled to Burgundy in the about 15 or more years ago, and spent with several visits to Burgundy. They became convinced that their wines should be picked earlier to make them more vibrant and fresher and punchier, and a la Burgundy. And that's exactly what they did. And harvesting a week before the norm in Mornington. They were excited about the results. And they also chose to use less oak influence to put more fruit emphasis on the wine styles, and that's part of the wine's signature. They've got 4 Chardonnay clones, and they commented that 3 of the clones responded really well to that early picking, but the clone that's used in the Grande didn't. So this is the exception to that early harvest rule, this is picked riper with more malolactic fermentation and 10% new oak to make a sort of rather fuller, richer style. Having read all that, and I found it quite interesting, it was good to taste the wine and see in the light of those changes how it shapes up. I think the word that springs to mind is opulent. It's a generous wine, once again with ripe stone fruit, peach, nectarine, citrus, but it has that thread of acidity that keeps it fresh and vibrant. Without that, I think the wine could become sort of almost overpoweringly cloying, but it doesn't. It's not like that at all. Quite fruit forward, but the lees and oak influence, somehow they sort of tend to emphasize the fruit. It's a big and complex wine, but there's a lot going on there. But it's got more fruit and subtle winemaker artifact seems to promote that as well. It got 95 points from the Real Review, and it was rated number 10 of 49 2016 Chardonnays from Mornington Peninsula. And the wine carries a recommended retail price of $80. And the winemaker Mike Aylward says that the classic food match for this is flathead tails from the bay. Now, I'm not sure, I don't think I've ever had a flathead tail. I'm intrigued by that, and it might be worth a trip to Mornington to see how that all works, because I love seafood, and I could see this going well with seafood, but flathead tails we'll find out perhaps sometime. That's my 2 wines now. Time, I think, for a couple of questions. What have we got here? The struck match you mentioned in the second wine, is that related to time and management on the lees? Well, yeah, the struck match is a reductive aspect to the wine, and there are a number of sources. Some vineyards tend to produce more struck flint, more reductive styles. Wild ferment certainly does. If you, it's more, you're more likely to get struck flint characters with wild ferment than not. There's, if one source of reductive characters is if the soils are very low in nitrates, the yeast can run out of nutrient during ferment, and they start to produce sulfide characters that can result in quite notable reductive notes in the wine. To stop that, if the winemaker chooses to stop that, they can add yeast nutrient, diammonium phosphate or DAP, and that'll stop. And then they can sparge it out with any luck by bubbling air through the wine or CO2, and add copper sulfate if that doesn't work, and that'll clean it up. But winemakers can choose to control that to some degree by their élevage, their method of looking after the wine between fermenting vat and bottle. So I don't know whether I have evaded or answered your question, but it's I'd say it is time and management on the lees is certainly a factor in terms of reductive characters. You mentioned Burgundy, Bob. Is that still the benchmark of Chardonnay worldwide? That's an easy one to answer. Yes, I think every serious Chardonnay winemaker should and probably does drink more than their share of white Burgundy. That's still few would argue that the greatest Chardonnays in the world are not from Burgundy. So yeah, that's the benchmark. And we might just carry on now, otherwise I'll run into all sorts of time problems. We've got now, we're now moving from Australia to New Zealand, and we're going to start with the 2018 Man of War Valhalla Chardonnay. This is Man of War is the largest Waiheke producer, and that has a most extraordinary number of vineyards. They've got, well, not just vineyards and blocks of vineyards, so parts of vineyards. They've got 75 with a total area of 59 hectares. So that's a real patchwork quilt and a labour of love to get the best out of those mostly quite small plots. This particular wine is from 6 Chardonnay vineyards with very colourful names. I thought I should read them out. It's I don't know who christened them, but Gorse Laneway, Root Rake, Bitch, Nikau, South 2, and Noisies. So that's quite a colourful collection of vineyard names. 2018 was, Aucklanders will remember it was quite a wet summer. We had cyclones, 2 cyclones, Fahey and Jita, and they applied a little bit of pressure. But when rain strikes, when cyclones strike, wineries that hand harvest and sort are really in a strong position, and that's exactly what they do at Man of War. The wine was wild fermented in 500-litre French puncheons, no lees stirring, and 10 months in oak. So let's just check this out. Well, that's quite a mouthful. Rich, weighty, creamy textured Chardonnay with quite a lot going on. You've got toast, sizzle butter, peach melon, and then green apple, flint, spice, citrus flavors, among others. It's a satisfyingly complex and quite textural wine that really demonstrates impressive viticultural and winemaking skills. To me, it suggests a slightly early pick to emphasize freshness and energy, but winemaker Duncan McTavish will probably say whether I'm on the right track or not when I see him in a few weeks' time. We scored that 95 points, and with it ranked 28th out of 200. Now this is, forgive this confusing number game, 28th out of 218 2018 Chardonnays from New Zealand. Sorry about that. The retail price is New Zealand dollars, $48. And Duncan McTavish says that the perfect food with this is freshly caught snapper or rich shellfish, such as scallops, but also is more than a match for white meats. And Duncan's well placed to get freshly caught snapper and plenty of shellfish, including scallops, in his wonderful spot near Man of War Bay on Waiheke that really needs to be visited. Okay. Now we've got certainly the most impressive package with a very heavyweight bottle and a wax cap, and the only wine in this lineup with a cork. This is 2018 Clearview Endeavour Vineyard Hawke's Bay Chardonnay. Sorry, yeah, Hawke's Bay Chardonnay. It's from coastal Teawonga, which is a good area for Chardonnay. There's quite heavyweight Chardonnays produced from that sub-region of Hawke's Bay. It gets the cooling effect of the sea breezes, and I think perhaps the saline influence in some of the wines that I've had from there could come from the sea rather than winemaking techniques. Clearview's reputation really was built on Chardonnay. Their very famous reserve Chardonnay is a star at many wine competitions. They've been around for a while. 1986, Tim Turvey started the winery, and it's been going strong then, and so is Tim. This is from the oldest Mendoza clone Chardonnay that they have, and it actually has the distinction of being New Zealand's most expensive Chardonnay. The red wax capsule is supposed to depict or represent the red cloth that Captain Cook, whose ship was the Endeavour, of course, gave or bartered with local Maori. So that's a postscript. Tasting notes. Let me try this wine and try and explain what I think it tastes like. Quite a notably deep colour. Really mouth-filling, sort of concentrated stone fruit, peach, hazelnut, citrus, grapefruit, brioche, appealing suggestion of just quite subtle of the struck flint character, quite textural. Really has a long, very long finish. Technically, very, very good. I think that's a very, very stylish Chardonnay indeed. 96 points it earned from us and was ranked number 5 of 74 2018 Chardonnays from Hawke's Bay. The price is a reassuringly expensive 175 New Zealand dollars. And winemaker Matt Kirby recommends a wide range of foods, including seared scallops, polenta chips, and seasonal tasting plate, which sounds like something Matt's pinched off the excellent menu at Clearview. Worth traveling out there for good, especially in summer, the nice al fresco outdoor dining and amongst the vines, and it's a very, very colorful place to visit, and you can enjoy perhaps a glass of the Endeavour Chardonnay when you call. We've now got a chance to answer some more questions, so let me check that. How important is temperature to get the best out of Chardonnay? That's an interesting question. I think temperature is very important. I like to. I'm quite pedantic about temperature, but it's very much a personal call. Now, my wife Marion likes Chardonnay very much, and she likes her Chardonnay at fridge temperature, which is 4 degrees, whereas I like it at my cellar temperature, which is 14 degrees. Now, that's quite a big difference, 10 degrees difference. And we've discussed why we each have a particular different view of serving temperature. And it seems that when you chill Chardonnay down, you lose flavor, you accentuate the acidity, and you get a greater tactile sensation. You know, that's the sensation that we get from chilled liquid. Now, Marion is the tactile side of Chardonnay is very important to her, so that's why she likes it quite cool, to really emphasize that tactile aspect of Chardonnay. Where to me, it's the flavor I'm after, so I prefer it slightly less chilled. But we're both right. It's just a personal approach. So I can't answer that. I can answer that and say I think yes, temperature is very important, but it's a personal call. I can't say everyone should be drinking Chardonnay at 14 degrees. That's just not on. So there we go. Temperature is important. I'm sure I'm going to fall over when I get the last try to tap the last bottle. Now we've got wine number 7 is 2018 Church Road Grand Reserve Chardonnay. This is from 2 vineyards, equal quantities. One at Tuki Vineyard and one next to Tomato Estate in Havelock North. They only produce this in exceptional vintages, and it's not the top. It's not the flagship Chardonnay. That's reserved for Tom, Church Road Tom Chardonnay. But in my view, it's not that far behind Tom, and certainly the gap is much narrower than the price between the two wines would suggest. There's a lot of love and more importantly selection goes behind this wine. It's only made in exceptional vintages, and it's the fruit comes from the best low cropping blocks. So I think it's got a great history of excellence over quite a number of years. Chris Scott, the winemaker, deserves a big pat on the back for this wine. Let's see what it's all about in the glass. Really peachy. It comes through very, very strongly, and it's peaches and cream again. It's got that smooth textured, creamy texture, which is lovely, but there's nothing subtle about the peach. It's just really expansive, lovely, delicious fruit flavors, interwoven with sort of fresh baked bread and toasted nuts. But the peach is slightly more dominant. Fine grained, moderately concentrated, and really weighty wine. It's supported by delicious mouthwatering acidity, beautifully balanced wine. That's a real pleasure to drink, and a good buy, I think, at New Zealand $40, which is one of the less expensive wines in this lineup. We scored at 95 points. I scored at 95 points, and it ranked 13 out of 74 2018 Chardonnays from Hawke's Bay. And Chris Scott, master Chardonnay maker, maintains that seared scallops with brown butter and caper sauce are just the job for this wine, and that's something I can easily put together. So I will be within the next week putting that to the test, but I'm sure it'll pass. Now we've got the last wine in the lineup is 2018 Isabel Estate Wild Barrique Chardonnay. Isabel Estate, that's from Marlborough, and Isabel Estate was started by Mike Tiller in 1980, which is very early days for Marlborough. Mike was if I remember rightly, I think he was an air traffic controller. He certainly flew his own aircraft, and it was flying over the Wairau Valley on a frosty morning that he spotted this frost-free site that really appealed to him, and subsequently went and bought it, and that was the Isabel Estate. It's sandy loam soils on the Wairau Valley, and a warm spot in the Wairau Valley. 45 hectares of the size of the vineyards, and once again, and he makes the two clones, Mendoza and Clone 15. I should say Mike's sold some time ago, so but he got it off the ground. Predominantly wild fermented and a mix of puncheons and barriques, but the winemaker does use a small proportion of inoculated fruit just to emphasize the fruit notes and to introduce a little bit of extra complexity. It was the champion Chardonnay in the 2019 Wine of the Year competition, so that's quite a distinction. Let's have a look at this. Oh, got the... There we go. Let's grab the wrong wine. That's an intensely flavored Chardonnay, but it's elegant. It's not overtly fruity. It's restrained, which I rather like. I get hazelnut, spicy oak, sort of brioche vanilla, and with sort of a savory, toasty complexity going on in the background. Creamy textured, terrific weight and great mouthfeel, reasonably soft acidity, has just a pleasing fineness, just a really good drink, great wine to drink. This has earned 95 points and was ranked #1, first of 49 2018 Chardonnays from Marlborough. The retail price is like the Church Road, $40, which I think makes this a very good buy. We've got a chance to a couple of questions. Mentioned the use of barrels. Do you notice the difference between French oak versus Hungarian, for example? Now, I haven't. I have tasted Hungarian or wine made in Hungarian oak, and some time ago, and only on one or two occasions. But there is a subtle difference. So yes, whether I wouldn't pick it in a blind taste, I wouldn't say that's what this wine's been in Hungarian oak. I don't think I'm as familiar with Hungarian oak I could certainly say that as far as French oak is concerned, or American oak, but not Hungarian. Any other top picks from Man of War? I asked because I managed to find quite a lot of it in the UK. Well, I'm generally pretty happy with the Man of War range across the board. I think they're often adventurous wines, always plenty of flavour and you know, good solid drinkable wines. But often slightly adventurous styles. I think that's it's a brand that that would inspire me to try it again and again, especially if it was relatively easy to find. What's your favorite overall style of Chardonnay? You know, I mean, that's a challenging question. There's much discussion about, a lot of people like the sort of great big and buttery styles, and there's certainly some that approach that. I mean, some that have got in this lineup that have got the bigness, but not the overt butteriness, not the excessive oakiness. And I think it's possible to make the big and buttery wines to be to make them very stylish, to make good examples of them, and clumsy examples with too much butter, too much oak, wines that have got plenty of flavor, but really I find very hard to drink more than a glass. My favorite style is I guess more along the Burgundy model. So those tight, taut, minerally wines that have power, but not obvious power, Lamborghini power, as opposed to Ford Cobra power. Just so if that's not too over the top. Yeah, so that's my style, the sort of Burgundy model, I'm afraid. Okay, so thank you very much for coming online to share these wines with us tonight. I'm assuming most of you are subscribers to The Real Review. If you're not, now's a good chance to make that jump. Don't forget to go to our Cellar Door-to-Door website if you want to more information on the wines, or to look at this tasting again, or to order directly from the winery. And don't forget to tune again in 2 weeks' time to listen to Ewan talk very eloquently about his choice of winter reds. Thank you once again, and good night.